is well with you and yours. This is Baddest Chaplain Podcast. I'm here today with an incredible author, storyteller, poet, and author of a new book, y'all. Everything is a story. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Kaitlin Curtice. Kaitlin, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Look at us being book twins. We're ready.
I
We knew the
know,
assignment.
we did it. Oh yeah,
We did it.
well done.
Exactly. So I've always been impressed by writers who can switch modalities the way that you do, because it's not easy. Like I know in my own mind, and it's funny because even as a fan of rap, there's times I'm like, I want to tell a story, but I want it to be a poem. And I'm like, you dummy, that's a rap. Just write a rap. But like, how do you describe yourself as a writer? Like as you move through being a poet, being a storyteller, and incorporating your culture and faith all in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's so interesting even like having to write a bio because I constantly am like, how do I want to, like, who am I and how do I want to like tell people who I am? Because that's the first thing people read is a bio. So they're like, what am I giving them right away, And that's why like in my bio I put poet storyteller with a hyphen, like it's hyphenated to be this thing that is connected and goes together, because that's just how it feels inside of me. Is that so much of poetry is a story, is this very like spiritual practice of storytelling, and that's just who I am. So being able to claim that is really important. And I've recently really had this really beautiful, tender, like, and powerful revelation that I've always been a poet, like, and a storyteller. And that's even like, I mean, in a previous life, I was a singer songwriter. I still write music, but I haven't recorded in a while. But even that, like, I've been writing songs and poetry since I was like 7 years old, and it's always been like what I needed, and I would channel other people's trauma or like joy or whatever, and I would write. It's like I was reading through some of my old journals, and like some of the songs and poems are like pretty dark, but it's not, it wasn't mine. It was like I was trying to feel the world around me and like create something with it. And so I think that's always been a part of me. And I talk about like that words are my medicine, and they're mine. And also like what I hope to give to other people is that words can be like a balm. They can be medicine in a really difficult world.
Totally. I think that's so real, because even something as simple as, like I mentioned before, I love hip hop, and one of the groups that I've listened to in my life, MOP, an artist in that group named Billy Danz was describing the music where he's telling these really gritty street tales. And he said, this relates to everyone because we all have frustration. Like I just make frustration music. And so it's just connects back to that sense of being so specific. You touch the universal, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
For sure. So in that same vein, we talked about this book at the beginning. Everything is a story. This is your new book. Can you tell us what inspired this book and what you hope readers will take away from it?
Yeah. So this is my fourth adult nonfiction book, and I was so excited to write it. Like I usually like once I've written a book and we're kind of I'm done with the writing process or I'm launching it, like the next book is sort of there and me waiting.
Sure.
That's how it's happened to be for me. It's not like that for everyone, but this book, like as soon as I finished Living Resistance, I was like, I know what I want to write next. I want it to be on storytelling, because this is what I've written on for the last decade. So I was like, this is the perfect thing for me to now investigate. And I wanted to read a ton of books on all sorts of topics, and I wanted to just explore the power of storytelling. So not so much that I'm like writing a book on how to write our story, or this story's right, this story's wrong. I wanted it to be like stepping out and asking what stories are and what they mean to us. And that's what I wanted to do with the book. And titling it Everything is a Story was so expansive. So that was a challenge, like how can I narrow it down to what I choose to put in the book? That was hard. But I loved writing it so much. And the framework of the book follows the life cycle of an oak tree. So there's this acorn on the front, and I always need a framework for my books because it just helps me move the stories in a certain way. Like Living Resistance had the realms of resistance, and I needed something for this, and I've always had a tender relationship to acorns, especially, and so I thought, like, can I make this work? Like, how can I, can I position the life cycle of a story alongside the life cycle of an oak tree and make it work? And I did. I made it work. But, it was really fun. It was really fun for me to explore that.
Absolutely. What was that writing process like, with having this framework that thankfully, I haven't read the book, it works, right? But was there ever moments where you're like, oh, how am I going to make this work? Especially at the beginning.
Yes.
And you're just like, did it feel like new territory for you, or did it feel familiar in terms of the other books you've written?
It felt familiar because I now know myself enough to know, like, how I write and the patterns I follow that help me write. But I was throughout it, and now as it's launching, I'm like, people are gonna love it. They're gonna think it's really weird. I don't know, like, are they gonna go with me? Are they going to dive in and really, like, go on this journey with me and see what I'm seeing? And that's what I felt. It felt like a really unique way to examine stories and how they're alive and how they live in the world and grow. And I was so excited, but the whole time I wrote it, I was like, we'll see how people go with me in this, you know? So.
Right. Totally. Did you feel like you were changing, or like as you've written each book, do you feel like it's affected you in a way where, like, the way I'm approaching this book is so drastically different than the second book, or presumably the first as well? Like, how do you notice writing changing you as a person and as a writer?
Yeah, I'm one of those people that believes that once there in you, I just feel it every time there's a certain point in the life of writing a story where the book sort of becomes their own person, like their own, where it's kind of like they're like, I'm going to do what I do now. I'm writing it, but it feels like they're taking me somewhere. And I definitely felt that with this book a lot. And this book, I turned it in a month early, which I've never done that. Like, to my editors, and I was really sad when I finished writing it. Like, I wanted to keep going. I didn't want it to be over. And this book felt like very much like an incubator. Like, I stepped into this really beautiful world of what stories mean, and I would just write. And it felt like so, not easy, but it felt like so good, the flow of it, that I was almost a little nervous. Like, is this like, why is it feeling like this? Why am I turning it in early? Am I not ready? Am I, tricking myself into thinking it's something it's not? But it was a really beautiful process and very different than my other books that I've written.
That's pretty exciting. That's really exciting. Yeah, definitely. So talk to us about the ideas you have in this book. So many of the ideas you have, that they're profound, and you have a wonderful way of sharing those ideas through your poems. So if you could find a poem from the book that you really loved personally, or one that was really meaningful to you, especially as you were creating this book.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So there's a chapter on stories of myth and othering where I kind of draw this line between, like, I start with talking about Bigfoot and Sasquatch stories, and then I thread it to like the burning times or the witch hunts and throughout history, and how that line of othering the outsider, and how we even use religion in order and culture to do that. And so this poem I wrote at a coffee shop in Texas one time. It was like an hour before I was supposed to be doing a speaking event on justice, and I'm like researching the witch trials, and which is something I've always been interested in, but I was just reading deeper into it and getting so angry. And so this is like an anger poem. I share a lot about how in myself I feel this this reality that I can be gentle and fierce. I can be soft and a fierce truth teller. That those things that we say don't go together happen to both be a part of me, and and I think a part of a lot of us, honestly. So that dance between these realities and these embodiments is very real for me. And this was a moment where I let my anger be there. And that was good for me. You know, it's a good practice sometimes, like to let your anger like lead you into poetry and alchemize that. So, so I wrote this as just thinking about these women throughout history who have been othered and in the name of religion and society. I light a candle for you, every single one of you, whose bright lights were snuffed out by a society that did not want your power, did not understand your mind, did not value your spirit, did not tolerate your exhaustion. I light a candle for you, because to this day we have not forgotten what it meant for you to leave this hurting earth, where your bodies were bruised and your spirits were mistreated. When I light this candle, I send love to you as you travel across the cosmos, as your spirit continues to burn brightly, a light they couldn't fully put out. When I light this candle, I hope you remember that you are sacred fire. And even though society discarded you all those years ago, the ripple effects of your heart and legacy live on in future generations, reminding us that we too are sacred, that we too are lights not meant to be burned out, lights meant to shine brightly in spaces where they still wait with their Bibles, torches, and crosses to snuff us out.
That's such a powerful work. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I mean that I hear that poem, and it just makes me think of the sort of through line I've been wrestling with now. Is I think about our elders who celebrated particular victories that they now have to witness their children and their grandchildren have to fight. And it's just like the way in which you're talking about something that was true centuries ago, that is true right now. That really is what's staying with me at this moment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So how does being a Potawatomi person inform the way that you tell these stories and the way you understand yourself within the context of I'm writing in this moment in time, but I'm also connected to the times that were before me?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, storytelling follows this, I want to just say like this mystical timeline that we don't understand. And I think that, of course, you know, I come from oral cultures, you know, so we come from oral cultures. Like, so that's, you know, obviously I'm writing a book, so I'm writing these stories, but like the you know, the people that we come from were speaking stories into the air, and that even that repetitive nature, that cyclical nature of storytelling is so real. And so I think for me, I'm trying to find ways to honor that, and then also show up in the day and time we live in now to you know, to be able to write those stories for people. So it's a dilemma for me, honestly, and like, but one that I'm happy to hold, because we are inheriting stories. We carry them in our bodies, we carry them in our spirits, and it's an ancestral line, and then it's also that line to future generations. So like for me to know that in the future generations can still pick up my books or listen on Audible or whatever, and they can hear me speaking these things and writing these things down is so like such an honor for me, and so meaningful, and just it makes me feel more connected to the stories and to the people who are holding those stories as well. It just and so it's like that I'm just like a piece of this larger puzzle, you know, of this beautiful mosaic of stories.
Absolutely. And I feel like so much of what you're saying also ties in to like the way spirituality is expressed, because it seems from having read your work even previous to this recent book, there is a sense of like the spirituality and culture is like intertwined with identity all up in it. So how have you seen your stories serve as this sort of bridge to help you work out and better understand your identity and work out and understand your spiritual identity? Because I know you've written in the past about like the deconstruction from like, you know, evangelical churches and things of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely like needed stories and words for myself, and I needed music, like, which is also storytelling. Like these things that have always been really important for me have been my medicine. Like those same things have been there for me throughout my life to process trauma, to process religious trauma and my spirituality. So, and my identity, right? Like you said. So that has just always been there. And I find that like when I'm ready to write a new book, I can tell that I need it. Like there's something in me where I wait till I'm ready, but then once I'm ready, I'm ready. And I need to like go into this exploration. And I think that so much of the problem of what we write sometimes is we want to label and box everything up for consumption, and we want to make it really like, you know, it's one reason why I like tell people I'm not writing books to give us answers. I want to help us ask questions. Like I'm not, you know, I got a review one time from a guy who was like, I wanted the answers in this book. And I thought that was so funny because I was like, that's not why I'm here. You know, like I can't tell you how to find these things. And I want to be like a companion for people to explore the world around them. So that's been so necessary for me in my journey, is in this like expansiveness, to find other authors who help me to find music that helps me process, to read poetry and write poetry, to engage with the earth. Like that, all of that has been a really important part of my journey. And I just happen to be a writer. So that then flows into my books, you know, like whatever we do, whatever kind of creators we are, it flows into our work. Like that's what we do, you know?
Absolutely. And I love that you lift up this whole notion of wanting the answers. Cause I've found and been thinking a lot about the way in which empire culture, how it expresses itself in the general culture, but particularly through religious expression, doesn't really honor the process in the way that a lot of indigenous cultures do, right? So this whole way of wanting to just get the answer, almost having it microwave the air fried for you, is so countercultural to the ways that got us here, which were exploring and being connected to nature in a way that, wow, the more I learn, the more I have more questions, you know?
Yes, I love that so much. And it's true. Or even just I struggle so much with even like how we step into like solving problems, like very real problems in our society, but we're not pausing to see it clearly, or we're not pausing to, I want to hear someone else's story first before I jump to fixing something, because that's how we make it worse sometimes. It's like we jump to solve the problem without asking deeper questions around it. And I really struggle with that even as a writer, and like, how do I name that in the world and also like allow it to breathe? And, you know, it's hard.
Very, very difficult. And I think especially when we're talking about understanding what our sacred stories are, you know, for some people that has to be a very limited list of material. And I find that the more curious person allows the sacred to encounter them wherever they are. So for you, as you're engaging in stories, what does it mean to you to call stories sacred? And how does the sacred show up and surprise you in your own writing?
Oh, yeah. So writing for me is a very like spiritual practice, to the point that, you know, sometimes I read chunks of my own books and I'm like, where did that come from? You know, like, which is such a gift. And not all writers think that way. Many writers, like the craft of it is something very specific.
For sure.
And I, of course, am crafting it, but it is deeply spiritual for me. Like, I won't sit down to work on my books any day unless I know that my energy is in the right place. And that's very much an indigenous belief as well. Like we show up to ceremony, or we show up in a good way, right? We're trying to honor, where is my energy at today? And because I know that what I'm like typing into this computer and putting into this book is my medicine. So am I giving good medicine, you know? And that to me is the spiritual work of it, is how am I taking care of myself, my thoughts, my actions. I'm showing up to this book with all of who I am, you know, how am I honoring that? And in doing that, honoring the person who's going to read it. And that is such a spiritual practice for me. And I find just so much joy in that process. Like it's helped me, I think, just expand my beliefs and understandings and questions of the world around me. And I'm really grateful for that journey, even if it's sort of done in public through my books. I know so many people are asking the same questions. So if we can be there for each other through the books we write, like that's such a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having the sort of vulnerability to know that you don't have the precise answer, because I think there's a way that Empire will make it feel like writing has to just be scientific when it is art, and art will allow you to encounter the sacred and just sort of the unexpected in ways that you otherwise couldn't be prepared for.
Yeah. I remember when I was writing Living Resistance and I created this cyclical framework of the realms, I was like, we were talking about the subtitle for the book or something, and they put the word vision in the subtitle, and I literally, what my mind went to is like, I'm standing in like a boardroom full of like older white men in suits, and I'm trying to present my book to them. And I thought, if the subtitle has the word vision in it, they won't take me seriously, so we need to change it. And then eventually I realized, like, no, a vision is way more powerful than a framework, like that. I don't need to use the colonial language to get the gaze of these white men in suits. Like, I need to be who I am in the world, and then still show up in those spaces and do this subversive work of helping them understand, what this is. And I think about that a lot, just for myself. Like, how am I showing up to the work in Empire, in these spaces that are colonial and really difficult? And we have to be true to what we write and believe in it,
No question. So as you move through the world as an Indigenous woman, poet, and storyteller, especially when you have to go into those spaces, because we can't avoid those spaces entirely. That's not the reality we live in.
No.
What responsibility do you feel that you carry when you write, you share your work, when you show up in these spaces?
Yeah. I very much so feel, like I said, that like subversive energy. Like I often begin, I do retreats, I do like university visits, I do keynotes and conferences, and each one has its own different kind of energy, with even with like keynote lectures, I'll show up and say, I'm going to read you a poem as we get started. Like, there's a reason I do this. It's so that we can stop and breathe for a moment, because even a lecture or like a keynote, that style is a very colonial practice. Like, I'm standing up here, I'm going to talk at you for 20 minutes, and then you get to bombard me with questions, even though you haven't processed what I'm saying. So,
no chance.
The whole thing, So I'm very like, I had to learn over the years as a speaker, like, I need to be who I am. I'm not going to show up and pretend to be overly academic or try to impress. Like, I have to show up as I am and trust that whatever I'm bringing will reach people. And if they don't let it reach them, then that's not on me. Like, I have to let it go. And so that's how I've approached my work, is I'm going to read poetry. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to invite them into the truth telling. We're going to go on that journey together, and then I'm going to leave, and they have to decide who they want to be once I'm gone. And that's like, where I leave it. So yeah.
Now, I think that's so much more of a freeing way to move through the world, because, as you spoke about, like this, the keynote lecture, I think about all the lectures I've witnessed where you could tell someone came into the room with their comment locked and loaded, and they get to that microphone and they say, this is more of a comment than a question, and they lecture you in return, and it's just like, man, you didn't hear a word I said. You just had everything you had in your mind already,
Exactly. I stopped doing Q&As, live Q&As for my speaking events, because I was realizing, like, this feels like a violence to me as an Indigenous woman, like coming and bringing these things and then having that constant bombardment, like, that's not a reciprocity, because they haven't had time. If it's a retreat setting where you're like, we're sitting and we're working through this stuff together, that's very different than that other context. So, so I do like questions ahead of time, or they have to write them down and I get to choose the ones I answer, because it's just setting up. And I hope other people will consider, especially like BIPOC folks or folks from oppressed, groups, like that is really important, because
Totally.
even a speaking event can be a dangerous space for us. Like it's not, and we're there giving our stories and sharing our work, and it should be held in that safety. So we need to protect ourselves too.
No question.
And that's a huge part of the work. Yeah.
No question. And it makes me think about all the different ways and mediums through which we deliver the truth. I often, whenever I have like comedians on the show, I talk about how, as a minister, I was like, we're working the same corner. We're saying it in very different ways, but we're working the same corner. Yeah. And I think about poets in the same regard. Poets have this responsibility of delivering the truth, perhaps in an abstract way, perhaps in a very visceral way, depending on the poet. But what sort of role do you find poetry playing in your own storytelling when it comes to capturing truths that prose can't contain?
Yeah. Poetry is extremely visceral, and it's extremely like, at least for me, like written in that moment. Like there's a poem in the book that I write about Saint Bridget and Jesus. And it's this poem that is about, for me, it was a poem about my own spiritual journey, honestly. And when I finished writing it, I cried. Like I just sat there and cried for a little while, because it was so evocative for me, and it brought up so much in me. But I wrote it quickly, got it out of my body, and then it was just there, and I reread it and just sat with it and felt it so deeply. So poetry is this whole world that can hold us, and I appreciate you talking about how powerful poetry is, because sometimes in the US I don't feel like we value poets in ways that other places might. Like I've been doing some work in like the UK and Northern Ireland, and just sitting with like the power of the poets there. Like they honor the prophetic like word of their poets so much. Totally. And like to speak to politics, to speak into history, and like that is what poets do everywhere, all over the world. That is what we do. We are speaking truth to power. We are naming things that people don't know how to name, and we're putting that into poetry, and we shouldn't underestimate it. It's Not incredibly powerful.
Not at all. Absolutely. And I think especially in this moment that is so dominated by the myth making of empire, and has to sustain itself on cruelty rather than honesty or compassion. And like I'm just thinking about this opportunity that storytellers like yourself have to be instrumental in our collective healing. So do you see yourself when you're like writing this, or is it something like after the fact where you're like, I see how this text I've written, this poem I've written, is a tool for healing both myself and my neighbors?
I certainly hope for that, and I certainly doubt myself too. Understood. I have these moments where I'm like, this is gonna find somebody and it's gonna be what they need, and then I have these moments where I'm like, sharing a poem today is just not enough, and my like not enoughness feels very real. Like but it is enough, and I think that we need to remember that and remind each other too. So when I meet other poets, when I meet musicians, like I want them to know how much their work in the world means, because we all feel that. We all feel like we're not enough, and we are enough, and we're doing really important work.
Totally. And you never get to, at least what I tell myself, is like you never get to see the full impact of what you've done, right? Like, there are poems you've written that person whose life was changed by it's never going to be able to tell you that. But just knowing that you got it out into the world is going to be the transformative nature of it,
Yeah. Absolutely. I have a poem I wrote like a few months ago that I turned into a song. And I play piano and guitar, and so I turned this poem into a song, and the beginning line of the poem is, I want to write a poem about nothing in a world that demands I always write about something.
For real.
And even that like sounds like it's just like a silly song, but I want people to feel like the depth of it. That can we also like let go and write about the things that seem to be nothing in the world, that are actually the deeper things than what society demands we constantly write about.
Totally.
You know, so even something like that, again, it's like the subversive work in our words is there.
No question. No question. So what advice would you give to someone who's engaging with your work, who is trying to reclaim their own story after years of silence and disconnection and just sort of being like immersed in the myth making of empire? Like, how would you help them find their own story?
You've got to get the noise out of your head, like, you know, and you've got to spend time like honoring who you are and what your story is. And that's like, because our writing flows out of who we are and how we're spending time with our own souls and our own stories. And so a few weeks ago, I ended up getting shingles from the stress of launching my book. Like you know, it was like this, it's go time. I have to now like dive into the work. And I was stressing myself out so much, you know, I was forgetting my own story and who I am. And so my body was letting me know. And I ended up like, I set like downtime on my phone for social media. So it, you know, it doesn't come on until a certain time in the morning and then it shuts off in the afternoon. So I basically shortened my work day because I had so much noise in my head. And social media, totally a part of our life, totally an important tool.
Right.
But we can and we do allow it to go way too far and seep too deeply into us. And
agreed.
If we want to honor and reclaim and pay attention to our stories and then write them and speak them, that takes work, and it takes patience and time and a lot of care. And we can't show up to it in the same way if there's noise in our heads and in our hearts. So it really, I think, is a really important spiritual practice. I journal a lot, like write out the things that are happening in your heart. Pay attention to your dreams, because dreams are important and they tell us who we are and they speak so much truth to us. You know, all of that is part of reclaiming who we are from a society and a world that wants to tell us who we are. And again, that's where, like, as writers, we should find ways to even like subvert those labels that are put on us constantly. Like, who are we at the core of who we are, not just like what everyone tells us we should be and we are.
Totally.
And that takes time, but it's a beautiful journey. So I would encourage that, to step out of the noise, to get quiet, and to like deeply just invest in your own soul and see what's there.
Yeah, totally it. Totally it. I'm thinking about the ways in which we think about belonging in the world. Like, how do you hope your work contributes to these conversations about justice, community, and belonging, particularly in a time when something that feels as innocent as saying people belong or we should have community has been so overly politicized? Like, how do you envision your work helping people get back into community?
That's a great question. I really struggle with this because I fear that it won't. You know, like
I hear you.
I hope that I hear you. I hope these words are doing what I want them to do. And I'm very much someone who believes that that when we read something, or we get to know someone new, or we have a belief that's challenged, like these things that happen on the very micro level in our lives that change the way we think or the way we participate in the world, like those moments of change have ripple effects. And I think they do. If enough people are paying attention to that inner part of who they are, it will build into changing communities and changing conversations. And I truly believe that. And I think that is a really important part of who we are for each other. Is I can go on social media and I can say all day long the right things that I should be saying. But like, how am I like living it and believing it in my heart and in my soul and in my mind every day, that's actually going to change my actions in my everyday life too? Like, how am I showing up? And I always hope that my books like help people hold that gray liminal space of I'm trying to show up well in the world. I'm trying to like, oh, Kaitlin wrote this line. I never thought about this that way. I should investigate that further for myself. I should ask some deeper questions of that and see where it takes me. And I hope that those kinds of questions and explorations lead us deeper into community with each other and subvert empire and subvert, the actions that are empty, that we like have something behind them. Does that make sense?
That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, because just thinking about just the ways in which like you help people wake up, help people realize that like we have an interdependence, that we aren't just siloed. We're not just operating in vacuums where I have to get mine before you get yours,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
As folks are hearing us speak and we've referenced your previous works, like what would you commend to someone who is like, wow, I really like what Kaitlin is speaking about. I want to start reading her work or engaging with her work. Where would you send them first?
Probably to read Native, because I'm looking at my books on my shelf. Just because like that begins with my story. It helps sort of frame things and even Native, like I hoped when I wrote Native that people who are in their identity trying to figure things out, especially with identity and faith or spirituality, like I wanted Native to be a safe place for them to ask some really deep questions about like decolonization and how we show up as who we are faithfully in the world, and also whatever we believe or understand about the sacred or God. And so I think Native is a good place to start, just because that gives them sort of a launching point, to my work. But please buy my new book too.
Oh, 100%. That's what we're here for.
Native is helpful.
Yeah. She said, after you get Everything is the Story, feel free to peruse Native, So where would you want folks to capture a copy of this text? Is it important for you to go to like a particular bookstore or just like anywhere books are available?
Yeah, I mean, like bookshop.org is awesome because you can find your local shop. And my local shop, Main Point Books in Pennsylvania, you can pre-order there, which has been really awesome. Cool. And so, yeah, any of those I think is really great. I know people are still going to buy from Amazon. And honestly, as authors, like we're still dependent upon that.
No question.
But it's also great to just share the joy with your local shops and ask them to carry the book. So.
Totally it.
Yeah.
And finally, if you could leave your listeners, our conversation partners today, with one invitation, one truth, a story, what would you leave with them today?
I'm thinking about, when we're talking about community, the beautiful story of Sky Woman falling from above down to the earth, and Sky Woman is pregnant, and she is falling, and there's a great tree there. She grabs a bunch of sort of the seeds, the leaves from the tree, and is holding them in her hand, this pregnant woman falling through the sky. And the geese gather together and they catch her so that she doesn't get harmed. And they slowly lower her down to Turtle's back, which is Turtle, Mashike is why we call this land Turtle Island. Turtle is very important to us. But the geese and Sky Woman, all of that like kinship and community and care is so beautiful, and constantly serves as a reminder to me of just the poetry in creation stories and in the myths and the stories we tell, the beautiful poetry in it, and the ways that we can hold that in whatever timeline we live in. Like we can hold the power of community through a story, and that story guides me and holds me a lot.
Yeah, totally it. I love that. And I just think about the way in which something I've just been wrestling with a lot is the ways in which we've been invited by the Creator to co-create and to just continue to be generative and not destructive,
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Kaitlin, this has been an honor and a joy. I want to thank you so much for being here, and to you all who are watching and listening. So I want to thank you all so much for watching and listening, and be sure to subscribe to baddishchaplain.com. We're also on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, hopefully anywhere you're getting podcasts, live streaming on Twitch and LinkedIn. So if you're a business kind of person on LinkedIn, if you're playing video games, you want to hear somebody have a cool conversation on Twitch, go ahead and do that too. And until next time, y'all be safe out here.
Thank you.
Thank you.